podcast where we talk to smart people, but not necessarily done by smart people?
That is an awesome question.
This one goes down probably on one of my top 5.
Hey, I like nutrition. I like to eat food.
This is the coolest thing ever. We're going to do this forever.
I wish I paid more attention in that class.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I don't understand that. As a man, I don't get it.
Welcome to smartpeoplepodcast.com.
Hello, welcome to Smart People Podcast, conversations that satisfy your curious mind. I'm Chris Stemp. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today we're talking about a topic that we're all fairly familiar with. It's been dominating the news for over a year now. It's been really brought into the forefront by the Occupy Wall Street movement and the idea of the 1%. We're talking about income inequality. And finally, we have two folks on the show today that are proposing a solution. And after listening to this episode, I gotta admit, I like what they have to say. And they've even changed my views a little bit. My views have been changing over time, as I mentioned, but this whole idea of corporate taxation, there's just so much wrong with it. And it's more than just tax loopholes. It's more than just raising the corporate rate, which for a while made sense to me until I realized what it actually means to run a small business. You know, small business it can be millions of dollars and you think, oh, they got plenty of money. But it can also be, tens of thousands or maybe a couple, in the six figures. And after you're trying to pay staff and help, I don't need to go into it. But the point is, there's a lot of nuances. And I'm happy to bring on the show today two very smart gentlemen who are proposing a solution that they call the third way. The first way being capitalism, the second way being socialism, both of which have their strengths and weaknesses. The third way being inclusive capitalism. So on the show today, we have Upendra Chivukula and Veny Musum. Man, those were not easy names, and I'm not even positive I got them correct, even though I asked them. Just for some background, Upendra was nominated by Governor Chris Christie as commissioner to the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Prior to that, he served as the deputy speaker of the New Jersey Assembly and represented the 17th Legislative District. He holds a master's degree in electronic engineering and is one of the New Jersey Legislative's leading experts on science and technology. Veny began work in corporate America as district manager for Clairol. He moved on to Paul Mitchell and quickly rose to become senior vice president. He's a successful real estate and equity investor, and he learned firsthand the importance of capital and cash flow producing assets. Another thing that's interesting is Veny is a Republican, Upendra is a Democrat. What they are proposing is pretty much a bipartisan effort. The book is called The Third Way, Economic Reform or Social Revolution, the Solution to Income Inequality. And the key here is building inclusive capitalism through employee ownership. I don't need to get into much more because we talk about it in the interview. So I'm going to get into the interview. Guys, we're getting active on Twitter. So if you're over there, we're at Smart People Pod. Let us know what you think. Reach out. We love hearing from you. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter at smartpeoplepodcast.com. And as always, at this time of year, happy holidays, safe travels, and enjoy.
So I love having two guests on at the same time. We've done it a few times in the past, and it always provides for a new dynamic. So appreciate you both being on. And I really want to jump in because I want to spend the kind of entire episode on this subject, given how complex it is, how new and different it is. And in the little bit that I know thus far, it seems like a really good solution. So if you guys could give us a brief, and then we'll go in each section, a brief overview of what you mean by, the third way. What is inclusive capitalism?
Okay, great point. The reason we wrote the book in the first place is because what's happening both domestically and internationally is not working. That, I think, is pretty obvious to everyone. The level of discontent, bordering on unrest, is rising dramatically. And the third way really is this. It breaks down the two extremes. One of the logos in the book says capitalism is works but isn't fair. Socialism works in theory, but it doesn't work. So capitalism isn't fair. Socialism doesn't work. This is the third way.
What about communism?
Well, communism really is the ultimate end of the socialistic.
Yeah, communism has failed. Yeah.
So so you're saying that the two that could or have sort of worked, being capitalism and socialism, but the next one, the best, newest, is this third way.
Right.
Okay.
In America, you have capitalism, and in Europe, many other countries, you have socialism, and the number of financial problems, a lot of things that are going on. And, the key here is that what is the problem? The problem is that over the past 3 or 4 decades, the U.S. economy has grown, and the real earnings of the workers has not gone up. And how is that we're going to engage the real workers, regular workers, to be part of this growing economy? I think that's what the third way is all about.
Actually, that's a really great way of putting it. To just succinctly say, look, if we're talking about capitalism specifically, we're talking about it in the United States, the largest economy in the world, most prosperous. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But it is working in a sense in that the economy is growing. However, for most people, their wages, the value of the money they have is either the same or declining. And that's a problem. That's the problem we're solving, right?
Yeah, it benefits those in the upper 10% of the earnings, and the bulk of the earnings go to the 10% of primarily those in the upper 1%.
Yeah. And Chris, let me just say right off the bat, in our book, the Third Way book, millionaires and billionaires already know what's in this book. They know it. The real growth is on the capital side of the equation. Some great pieces of information that is on our website, which is thethirdwaybook.com, shows, for example, the CBO of the last couple decades, the top 1% income has grown over 275%, while the bottom 80% has been stagnant, if not declining. The second thing there was another study done by Brookings that showed recently that for the top 20% of earners, 86% of their income was coming from capital, wealth, and capital income. So that, my math tells me that 14% is left for everybody else, for the other 80%. So it's really pretty clear that the real growth, the reason that this disparity is happening is because of the capital side, the capital growth. And most people don't even know what that is.
I was going to say, if you could explain what you mean by capital wealth, capital income.
Okay. The first thing you have to know, and I'm glad we have the time to explain this.
Sure.
If people understand what capital is 10 things. Capital is anything that increases the productive power of labor. We should etch that in stone. Capital is anything that increases the productive power of labor. What that means is, anything beyond your muscle and sinew and your physical labor, everything else that's a tool. For example, a great analogy is a carpenter with a hammer is a capitalist because he has a tool. A carpenter with a hammer gun is an ultra-capitalist. A carpenter with a crew of people that are working with power tools are mega-capitalists, and a carpenter with a team that shares the wealth that they produce with those tools is a saint. So people that hate capitalism, it's because what they hate is the fact that the people that are owning this productive power, it's not owned by the masses of people, it's owned by a smaller and smaller share. And that is a very, very bad thing, because technology is, and we hope we can get into that, technology is driving this big disparity in wealth.
I think one other point I would like to make, Chris, is that, the old-fashioned way is, go to work for 8 hours a day, and your wages keep increasing and you make some money. But if you have taken that money and you have saved the money and invested in the stock market or some kind of equity increasing, that is your capital. Whether it's real estate, whether it's options, whatever it might be, that is your capital, and that capital grows. It doesn't work only 8 hours a day. It works 24 hours and 7 days a week and all through the year.
Right.
I think that's the key. And a lot of the workers, their wages are stagnant, and even if they had wages increasing, they're not going to increase at the same rate as the capital growth. If you look at the stock market, how it has grown, and not everybody has stocks, and some people are fortunate. About 10,000 people are fortunate to be working for companies that are giving 10,000 companies. I guess they're giving capital ownership and sharing, and that's what is helping them.
Right. Yeah, the statistic is they're now, which is shocking, but most people don't realize this. There's a quiet revolution going on, Chris, that people are not aware of. As Upendra just mentioned, there's over 10,000 companies doing this now, where workers get a piece of shared equity. And recently, as of 2 years ago, there's nearly 15 million people participating in this, which just passed the amount of people in private unions. So the union membership is going down pretty dramatically, while the amount of people that are getting equity in their business is rising. But we'd like to get that amount with intelligent public policy from 15 million to 150 million. You would literally permanently solve the income inequality problem, and everybody wins. The workers win, the companies win, and the society wins. Every one of those segments wins because the workers now share in that capital wealth. The companies, there's a great book out called Shared Capitalism that shows, it's based on over 100 years of data that shows virtually every metric, every business metric, and I was a business person, whether it's profits or sales or morale or absenteeism, everything you want to go up goes up, everything you want to go that you don't want to go up doesn't. So it's a win-win for the company. The company's not 100%, but generally it works very, very well for the company. And lastly, and probably really importantly, is society in general wins, because now if you have people having their own wealth, you don't have to have this redistribution model, which is the socialistic and the real extreme version, the communistic version, where the state owns everything. We want the people to, one of our sayings is, the old saying, power to the people. Power to the people. Put the money back in the hands of the people, but not through the government, through private industry. And everyone goes, wow, what a great idea. Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing this? And I often say is, we give lectures in the colleges and universities, and the students are like, especially the young people, are like, this is great. And I say, listen, don't be mad at your elected official because sadly they don't know the solution because they don't even understand the problem.
Right. And well, here's the thing. I'm glad you brought that up because I want to get to this solution. But first, I really want to outline this problem because a lot of people, I think, can hear this or read whatever we write up about it and go, yeah, we know income inequality is bad, and that's what, Occupy Wall Street. Everybody knows it's the top
huge issue.
Yeah, top 1%, awful. Okay, we get that. But it's more than that, and I really want to talk about first, let's go into the technology thing, for example.
Yeah.
So the way... It's obvious that if we stay on this path, at least it seems obvious to me, and tell me if I'm wrong. If we stay on this path, people that can acquire resources doing more of the resources you can acquire are able to do more things. Call it technology, computers, machines, whatever. And so those people produce more, need less labor, and eventually this is going to continue due to technology, right? Previously, you needed manual labor. You almost don't need it anymore.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that, when we start with the problem, our founding fathers understood the importance of broad-based ownership. For example, President John Adams said that property monopolized or in the possession of a few is a curse to mankind. We should preserve not absolute equality that is unnecessary, but preserve all from extreme poverty and all others from extravagant riches. I think that's what President Adams said.
Yes.
I think that's what the third way addresses that issue of the gap that is ever increasing gap that is growing between the rich and the poor. And also for a strong democracy to be strong, you need a very strong middle class. And if your middle class is becoming going in economic way, they're going poor, then it makes it tough, and there's all this unrest, whether it's Occupy Wall Street or whatever it
Baltimore.
is, or the crime rates, and people are they're looking for opportunity, access to opportunity, and they're left behind. I think that's the problem. We need to address that, and we believe that ownership, creating an ownership society, would address most of those problems.
Upendra brings up a really, really important point. This is not a new concept. The founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Adams, the first four presidents. If you go on our website, thethirdwaybook.com, you will see the quotes directly from our first four presidents. They understood they wanted three things. Let's be clear. They wanted low taxes, limited government, and broad-based property ownership. We have to understand, and I'm the Republican, my friend, my colleague, my co-author is the Democrat. But to all my Republican friends out there, you have to understand something. If you didn't have the third one, if you don't have broad-based property ownership, by definition, you have to have the other two. Because if people don't have property, you have to have high taxes, and you have to have a big government to redistribute wealth, which is the socialistic model. So my conservative colleagues need to understand, if we don't solve this problem and bring more wealth in the form of capital and property. Now, in our founders' day, it was all based on land. It was an agrarian economy. But they understood people needed to have enough property for subsistence. Now, fast forward, Abraham Lincoln and the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act was a brilliant move done by one of our great, if not our greatest president. The Homestead Act basically gave people capital. It gave them 160 acres of land for free, for nothing, just by if they'd go and work the land and stay on the land for a few years. And one of our, I'll give you a name out of history that I guarantee you, I'd be shocked if any of your people knew the name Galusha A. Grow.
No idea.
Who was Galusha A. Grow?
No idea.
No idea, right? Well, to all my Republican friends, he happened to have been the father of the Republican Party, and he was the Speaker of the House of Representatives under Abraham Lincoln. Okay, and in his last speech to Congress, he said, based on the Homestead Act, and I'll paraphrase, in the future we will not be able to solve the property broad-based property ownership through land, because there's only a limited amount of land. In the future, we will have to do it through shares of corporations. Hello?
Yeah. Well,
that quote is right on our website.
Well,
so don't let any Republican or any conservative tell you that this is not it's an idea that works for both conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, everybody. This is an idea steeped in history, and Upendra is absolutely right about that, bringing up our founding fathers.
I want to talk about the founding fathers in a minute here, but one thing I have to point out is, as you mentioned, kind of property ownership. I think about what happened, I believe it was under Clinton, I think, in the 90s. You know, let's have everybody own houses, and that directly led to the real estate boom and then bust, which was a massive problem. So what is the difference between owning property the right way and then doing it in a way where, hey, look, everyone should have a house, and now we've created our own problem?
Yeah, stupid idea. Because a house is not an asset. A house is not an income-producing asset.
But how does that differentiate? I'm trying to. How is it not property? I guess is.
No, I think in the case of under Clinton administration, I think they gave out. They actually loosened all the credit requirements, and then they gave to people who could hardly pay the mortgage payments. I think that was a mistake, as we realized later on, that led to the foreclosures and all those things. Right. I think that what we are saying is that let's say I work for a company, and in addition to the wages I get paid, I also should have a piece of that company, so that way I have a stake in that company and the company's growth and future. And what it does is it helps the employee to get part of the company, so that way the employee works harder to make the company better. And also, when the company does well, the top management, they are also doing very well and the company grows.
Right.
And there is no need to lay off people who are working so hard. And so I think the productivity in a global economy is very critical, and worker participation and through ownership of the company, I think it is going to make American companies competitive globally. I think that's the message.
Well, and I get that, and that is the solution, which we're going to talk about. I was just trying to make, because I assume there is a nuance that I want to clarify, which when we talk about property, we're not actually talking about physical, say, land or real estate in this sense. Because
real estate. But let's be clear. Let's be clear, Chris. In the information age, here's a very bright line. It's another thing that needs to be etched in stone. In the information age, which you just spoke of, you simply cannot get ahead on wages alone. You must acquire technologically driven, income-producing capital, regardless of its form, whether it's real estate, stocks, bonds, whatever. And basically, when you own a stock, you own a piece of a business. So, and when you own real estate, income-producing real estate. We had one of our colleagues, Professor Blasi, distinguished professor from Rutgers. He was on Fox Business, and here's someone. I won't embarrass the person that was one of the hosts of Fox Business, a very well-known host. He said, "Well, everyone that owns a house, they have owned property." But he forgot to tell you, and we looked it up. Do you know how many people that were in game shows that actually won a house that eventually had to give the house up?
Yeah, due to real estate taxes. I've heard about that.
Because they couldn't afford it. Because here's someone, and Professor Blasi was too polite, but here's someone that's on a major business channel that's giving out bad advice, erroneous advice, just because you own a house. I don't know about you, Chris, but unless that house has a tremendous capital appreciation and growing real estate market, most of the time that is a net negative to your income. It's not a net positive. You have a whole range of things where it costs you money. So just owning a house, that is not necessarily an income producing property. I own income producing real estate, and that's what you want to go towards, that or stocks or bonds or something that has either capital that is going to grow. So that's amazing that someone on a major network would give out bad information. Your residence, your domicile, is not necessarily a place where you're going to count on for your income.
That's great, and I appreciate you mentioning that. And I do want to we've touched on it. Obviously, the listeners now know the kind of theory that you're putting forth, or the solution with the third way, in having ownership, having the workers have ownership in the companies. Yes. And so I first want to go to this point where, well, let's do this. I'll have you want to spell it out further. Is there more that you want to talk about in the specifics?
Yes.
Because I think that's important.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's talk about the plan. You want? Go ahead. All right. First of all, the real low-hanging fruit, which everyone talks about, is our corporate tax rate, which is the highest in the world. It's an abomination. It is a convoluted mess of interest groups and companies that at 35%, it's a discouragement to business. And most of the time, let's face it, a business, even if they try to either avoid the tax, and if they pay the tax is passed along to the consumer. So the business doesn't actually pay. People don't realize that. The business doesn't really pay the taxes. It's paid. We consumers pay it in the form of high prices and things of that nature. So almost everyone on the Republican side is talking about cutting the corporate tax rate. We agree. However, and this is a hardcore Republican, and I'll challenge anybody. I would say not one dime would I give in tax relief unless it's shared with the workers. Otherwise, it's just another sop, and it's going to make the income inequality problem worse. Yes, we need to cut the corporate tax rate. We advocate cutting the corporate tax rate by 50%, all right, if it's shared in the form of a tax credit to the workers. And one of our most dramatic proposals, we have 3 points. The second thing is, in the inner cities, in the urban and rural enterprise zones, cut it to zero. and if you grant those tax credits to workers that live in those areas. Can you imagine, Chris, what that would do to our inner cities? Now, I reside in suburbia. It's one of the nicest communities in the country, Bernard's Township, Basking Ridge. But I grew up in the tough, hard streets of Newark, New Jersey. So I understand the hood. I understand what's going on. I also understand that we pump not millions, but billions and billions of dollars into inner cities, in Newark alone, all right? Public money. What it needs is private investment, private money. So cutting that corporate tax rate would bring in private revenue, and more importantly, imagine what that would do. I get goosebumps just talking about this. What it would do for the culture of the citizens and young people living in those areas where they could now own a piece of those companies. Let me tell you something. You're not gonna spray paint a building that you own. And you ain't going to let your homeboys do it either.
It makes sense. But now what about this? Let's talk about, because I like, seeing it, capitalism, that you guys are calling it inclusive capitalism. And from as much as I know, capitalism by itself, by its nature, is not inclusive, right? It's kind of the survival of the fittest, if you will. So if I'm an investor in a company and you say, hey, we have $10 million here. We can either pay it out in dividends, we can do stuff to grow the company further, but whatever it is, or we can give it to our employees. I think a lot of the short-sightedness or the quarter-to-quarter, stock price things that we manipulate, 10 times out of 10, shareholders are going to say, no, don't give it to employees. They're fine. They're making a livable wage at $60,000 or whatever, something kind of ridiculous, but give it to me, or how do we change that mindset? Or am I wrong in that?
Well, I think the key here is that when you look at some of the corporations that have been giving ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans that is under the federal legislation, like, for example, I worked for AT&T, and we had a 401k plan at the time I was working, and was a match for every dollar I put. For every $2 I put, the company was putting $3, something like that, and 66% match. Mm-hmm. And so what happened, that was able to allow me to retire at the age of 48. Mm-hmm. And that's what we are talking about. And also, when you look at these are large corporations and publicly traded. But one of the legislations I proposed when I was a legislator, well, at the state level, also we could do the similar thing, give 30% tax credits to companies which are privately held and under 500 employees, small businesses, mom and pop shops on Main Street. And when they are trying to sell their companies, and if you give them the 30% tax credit, they can use that to sell the companies locally rather than sell it to other states. And so that way you can retain the local employment. I think that's the key. I think at the state level, you can do that. Federal level, you have the ESOPs, making sure that we do the funding, proper funding, adequate funding for the ESOPs, so that way the federal program continues. And also, the state of Iowa introduced a legislation, and it became law, trying to give out tax credits to small businesses, so that way small businesses share the company shares with the employees. I think that's the key. I think one of the ways you can address the unemployment issue is that you create more and more employee-owned companies, so that way there will be less unemployment.
Yes. Chris, if you have intelligent public policy, it's not a zero-sum game. Because now, if you follow our plan and you give those tax credits, then it's not. I've talked to lots of business people, and they say absolutely I would share with my employees. If I didn't have to, I have two choices. I'll give you two choices: send the money down to Washington, or share with your employees. 100% of the time, they'd say they'd rather share with the employees. Now, even without that, let's remember, big like Microsoft, Apple, Google, virtually all of Silicon Valley was built with employee ownership and ESOP money, because that's how they attracted the best and the brightest. But then you have older line companies like Procter & Gamble's been doing this for years. General Motors, as we know, UPS, Amazon, supermarkets like Publix, one of the biggest in the Southeast, Whole Foods. This is happening with large, medium, and small-sized companies because it's good for business. But can you imagine if you couple that with these 10,000 companies that are already doing it, with if hello, if we got our elected officials to understand what a great idea this is. And by the way, we're not waiting for them. That's what we're going to the media, because if the people understand this, they're going to demand that. They will literally vote. And that's why this is a bipartisan book. Well, I've had people that are hardcore Republicans and hardcore Democrats say, I would literally vote for the other party that I'd never voted for before on this one issue alone. It's that powerful.
And just to clarify, because I don't know if we spelled it out, but for those that don't know, ESOP meaning Employee Stock Ownership Plan.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it goes under a lot of names. There's about a dozen different ways you can express it, but you can call it economic democracy, broad-based property ownership, ESOPs. There's many ways that the idea is expressed. Basically, it's a way of spreading capital to the middle and lower classes. I'll say it again. The billionaires and millionaires all know what's in our book. Let me tell you, does anyone think that Donald Trump is punching the clock, people? Okay? Right? He has real estate. He has businesses that are printing money every single day. Wake up.
You know what? I mean,
to demand that they get in on this.
There's so many kind of stories here that have had direct implications in my life, and not to make this about me, but I think it highlights what you're talking about. So one is my dad comes from a family. He had 8 siblings. They had a 2-bedroom place growing up, legitimately poor in the suburbs of New York. One working parent who did construction. Okay, they were legit poor. He went to the Air Force. He's a pilot. Now he works for FedEx. He's worked for FedEx for, 20, 25 years. He's a millionaire. I mean, not super millionaire, but multi-millionaire, right? Got a couple $1 million. Owns 2 houses, had 3 for... The point is, he has never made more than $250,000 a year, which is a good amount of money, but that's the max. And even that has been for maybe the past 5-10 years. Mm-hmm. The reason he has plenty of money and will forever is he has a retirement pension. He will make a decent amount of money forever from FedEx that is already funded through their pension plan.
Yes.
And I look at him and I go, look, you've put in decades of hard work, in the Air Force and all that, but I will never have that luxury. And I get a little frustrated. Yes,
absolutely. And listen, let me tell you something, Chris. I don't know how old you are, but when we speak to here's what's happening is the young people we see in the colleges and universities, they are desperate for this idea. I mean, they bought the hope and change, the great slogans, and now we got the people. I was asked on media the other day about the Republicans. A lot of great slogans and hot air, quite frankly. Where is the policies? This issue, by the way, that we're talking about was poll tested, and the polling came back at 70, 80, 90% off the chart. You can't get people to agree on what day it is. But when you put an idea like inclusive capitalism in front of them and sharing the wealth, young people are fired up about this. And let me talk to anyone that's an older person. You want to do the biggest favor to a person in your life, a middle-aged or young person. When you get them the Third Way book, you will show them the most fundamental thing they have to do to survive and thrive. This will be handed down literally from generation to generation. It's the most important thing that people can do for themselves and for their families. What we like to say is save the country, save the world, save yourself. Yeah. Learn what's in this book.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by the online education gurus over at Creative Live. Creative Live offers great online classes that help people enhance or dig into new skills like photography, design, music production, and business savvy. You can watch classes in their massive online catalog. There's always something streaming for free, and learn from the best. Experts like Lewis Howes, Ryan Holiday, and Alex Bloomberg will show you how to hone your creative skills and be the best at doing what you love. Go to creativelive.com/smartpeople for 20% off any of Creative Live's classes. Join millions of students from around the world and make your living doing what you love. Again, that's creativelive.com/smartpeople for 20% off. And now back to the episode.
Well, you know what else is interesting is, so I'm a Democrat. Anyone who listens to this podcast knows that. But I don't just associate with the party. If there was a great Republican that I believe in, that's fine. I'd vote for him. It's really all about policy. Yeah. And so I've always looked at corporations as evil, just because that's kind of, I'm a millennial and, all that. Okay.
Sure.
Or companies in general, for profits. Mm-hmm. So then we created this podcast for fun. And it started making money. Not a ton of money, but a decent amount. And we have to start paying taxes. And at a basically a 30% rate. We don't have the ability to get out of our taxes or anything like that, right? Because we don't make a lot of money. So we made the most money this past year. We want to grow the show. We want to provide a better service. We want to do internet, web-based content. We want to do YouTube content, etc. And we were thinking, man, it'd be great to hire one or two people, maybe part-time, maybe from another country, right? We'd use something like Odesk or Elance or whatever. And, somebody in India or, to lift this global economy up. The problem is we literally cannot afford it. When you take our expenses and our taxes, it is what comes to us, if you will, is almost nothing. Yeah. And that's when I realized, man, we worked for 5 years to turn this into a tiny business, and we are going to pay the vast majority in taxes.
Yes.
It's
crazy. While corporations are paying zero or minimal taxes because they have very good accountants and good lawyers.
Exactly.
And they're able to get away with that.
Right. So how do we, what's the solution there? Tell me about how the third way solves this problem that I am directly seeing.
Well, let me tell you straight out. Chris, once this idea, we've hit it at precisely the perfect time. If this idea gets out and gets into the mainstream at the election, this would literally decide the next president of the United States. No question about it. The idea is that powerful because people literally are desperate for real hope, real change, not sloganeering. And this is something that would help businesses. It would help the employees and help the economy in general, because it's just common sense. You're going to give more of your effort to something that you belong to and believe in, and the corporation wins because we're cutting their tax rate. Let me give you one other thing that if you talk about really stupid public policy, which is the third leg of our proposal. It's on our website, thethirdwaybook.com. We're calling for a reinstitution of the 50% income exclusion for banks that make loans to companies that were doing this. Do you know this was on the books? And both Bush 41 and the Clinton administration, 50-50, one took half of it out, the other one took the other half out and destroyed that. You talk about one of the dumbest things ever in the history of political theory or political policy was they took that away. And at the time, almost every company was beginning to form a office in their business to begin to explore this idea and put these into place. That would have literally solved all this problem. But it was Dan Rostenkowski, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, who eventually went to jail, by the way, for stealing postage stamps. I mean, this is the kind of people that are running our country. He abolished that idea, and the mud is on the hands of both the former Clinton administration and the Bush administration. They wiped this out. This 50% income exclusion to help banks make these loans to companies so they can give this stock away, that needs to be reinstituted. So cut the corporate tax rate 50%, 100% in the enterprise zones, bring back that income exclusion, and you would change the dynamic of public policy in this country for workers, peoples, and companies.
For example, Chris, if the banks give you a loan and then they get 50% off, and I think you'll be able to take that money to hire the people and share your company shares with the employees, and that's a path for you to grow as a company.
Yeah, exactly. So for the non-economists, or really most of us out here, explain how this could actually work in terms of, because the fear, as you mentioned earlier, is we cut corporate taxes, and knowing corporations, right? In capitalism, their pretty much sole job is to increase shareholder value. Right. So if you cut taxes, the most direct thing that would make sense in our current environment is to somehow just give that money to shareholders, essentially. Yeah.
Well, I think if you make the employees the shareholders also, and then of course they will also get the reap the benefits.
Okay. Yep. I never thought about it like that. Even though that is by definition
That's
what
the idea behind the book is that make the employees part owners of the company,
Right.
not just the top management, but also all levels of employees should be part of the company.
Yes, and Upendra brought up another point. We should not let this go by. Cut out the loopholes. Do you know GE, one of the biggest companies in the country, paid almost no taxes?
Oh yeah. Well, people hear that all the time. That's the headline. So,
Yeah.
I mean, essentially we're saying, okay, cut corporate tax loopholes, lower corporate taxes, and then somehow force them to like.
Don't force. No. Hold it. Yeah, because then you'll get my Republican friends all up in arms.
Okay.
It's a voluntary program, and that's what right away they're going to sit there. And I've seen this when this idea starts to percolate up. Right away they go, "Oh, you're going to force No."
Wait, but how can you cut corporate taxes and then say, hey, if you want to give it to employees, go ahead? They're going to say, no, screw you. I'm going to take it for myself. I'm going to make CEOs get paid 1,000 times more than just 200. You know what I mean?
No. I think the here is that not mandating them, but creating the incentives for the corporation and making sure that the tax money that you are giving, tax breaks that you are giving, is passed on to the employee owners.
I got you. So it's not that. So is it that you would lower corporate tax rate, or is it that you would make it the same, but say you get a tax break if and only if it goes to the employees?
Exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Now listen, our proposal is bold. There's no doubt about it. We're saying we're advocating dollar for dollar in the tax credit. Listen, when it got into Ways and Means, if they said, okay, we would do this if you got $2 of a tax credit for $1 of shares to an employee. I mean, that could all be negotiated out. And by the way, Upendra is a genius, is a legislative genius. He has how many laws? 70, more than 70 laws. He knows how to bring compromise.
The state government,
the state.
Federal government is a mystery to everybody.
Right. but Upendra is a very, very, very wise man and wise politician, and I'm honored that he's my co-author. We could find a compromise to bring that, but the main thing is to keep the genesis of the idea. The main part of the idea is, yes, share property, and the best way to do it is with shares of corporations. And the low-hanging fruit is this obvious, really dumb way of trying to raise revenue through the highest corporate tax rate in the world. That is really stupid. And you're hearing a lot about it. But again, not one dime. If I would, unless it's shared with workers.
So now, how about this? We lower corporate tax rates, so essentially the government is collecting less taxes, which means, I mean, at its core, right, smaller government, which is fine.
No.
I don't.
Well, not necessarily, because remember, please don't forget, we advocate cutting out the loopholes. Also, in those, when those shares are granted, now the employees, a portion of that, they have income now. They have that some of that is paid by the employees. So there's a lot of ways to work this through that it's really a net neutral. There's really no loss of revenue. Plus, and a lot of presidential candidates have been saying this, if you do cut that corporate, don't forget growth. You're going to make up a lot of that ground in growth. They are talking about that. So there's no doubt about it. If you lower those corporate tax rates, first of all, you're going to stop having all these companies headquartered overseas. What do you think's happening? We're literally driving companies. That's pretty obvious. We're driving corporations and their headquarters overseas because we have a worldwide system instead of a territorial corporate tax system. So you literally punish someone for having their corporation headquartered in the United States. Again, a really stupid idea.
Yeah.
So yes, we want to have corporations, headquartered here. Mm-hmm. But if you put the whole mix together, it should result in increased growth, and that should also make up for. There really should be no loss of revenue.
One of the interesting things about the idea here is that President Ronald Reagan, who's respected by so many, he supported that, and he was an advocate for employee ownership. Also, currently, the presidential candidate, Bernie Sanders,
Yes.
he's also one of the speeches at the ESOP convention. He talked about why it is important that employees should be part of the company, so that way the disparity will decrease.
Can you imagine that, Chris? Chris, if you go on our website, thethirdwaybook.com, with the number 3, the number 3, you will literally see we have the archived footage of both President Ronald Reagan, Republican, and Socialist Democrat Bernie Sanders, both giving speeches, and they're almost identical. They're both advocating this idea. It's amazing. On this one issue. It's amazing. It's mind-blowing. And now you have the former Deputy Speaker, Democrat Upendra Chivukula, myself, a Republican committeeman, lifetime Republican. We're on this issue, we agree 100% because it's common sense.
Well, wait, Veny, let me ask you real quick. Are you going to vote for Bernie?
Well, let me tell you something. I am not. This is one of the reasons I'm doing this. I want to get the word out to my Republican brethren. I am hoping, I am praying. If they need me, I will beg them, for God's sakes, wake up and see this idea. Because once they see it, whoever does this, I'll say it again, whoever picks up on this idea will be the decisive issue, will literally change the election. Someone in the middle of the pack could literally overtake the top candidates with this one issue. It polls it at 80 and 90%. It's that powerful because it solves the economic issue of the day, income inequality.
Well, here's the thing. Assuming that nothing changes, and Bernie, especially, I mean, this is what I think as well, but you guys kind of clarify, is the closest to this. And the government, especially at the federal level, seems to be more on like an iterative change, right? You have to get somebody to just start. If he's the closest and nothing changes, would you vote for him? Or
listen, I admire him. I think he's bringing up a lot of good issues. The system is corrupt. We have crony capitalism now. We like to call it concentrated capitalism, where now 80% of the capital wealth is owned by 20% of the people. When we get to a point where it's not 10% own 90%, we literally are back to a feudalistic society that Washington and Jefferson, that they fled Europe to get away from that. We're getting closer and closer to that. However, because of he's right on this issue. But unfortunately, like we say in the book, when you go all the way to socialism, you're going too far. You go off the cliff, because what is he doing? He's now empowering the government.
Right.
Not that's the bright line we have to understand here, Chris, is we are talking about power to the people, power to the private enterprise, not empowering the state. Many of your top radio talk shows, they talk about they call it a status. We are not advocating that. We want private capital in the private hands, which is what our founding fathers wanted, which is what Lincoln wanted, which is what Bernie wants and Ronald Reagan wanted. But if Bernie kept it just to that issue, that'd be great. But unfortunately, you have to, it's all the other stuff that goes along with it that is proven not to work. History shows socialism and communism does not work.
And again, you guys are the experts here, so just pardon my ignorance, but isn't a lot of, say, like, I don't know, Denmark, Norway, a lot of the countries that seem to be Amazing, aren't they socialist?
Look at their unemployment rate.
I honestly don't know. That's why
look at their GDP. Look at their GDP. It's there's
the productivity. If you look at it, they have the number of hours in a day and number of days in a month or a year. They are working a lot less than American workers are working very hard. And I don't think they're getting all the benefits. I think what we are saying is that capitalism is working because anybody, there's no starting point. Wherever you start, and if you have the right ideas, right circumstances, you could become a multi-millionaire, a billionaire in this country.
Gotcha.
But what we're saying is that not everybody has that kind of innovation ability, and so we should encourage all the people to be, as long as they're putting productive time towards growing the company, they should be part owners of that company. I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about giving money to the people, but they have to work.
Yes.
They have to earn it.
Sure.
And in addition to earning the wages, they have to be rewarded with the part of the company.
Yes. Chris, it really comes down to three choices, and they're on our website, thirdwaybook.com. There's really only three choices. Either you're going to have one is a redistribution welfare state. The second is, which we're barreling towards, which is a plutocracy, ruled by the rich, or a feudalistic society, or the third way, which is a broad-based inclusive capitalism. It's one of those three choices. The first two are really bad.
Right. So walk through something with me here real quick, because this is one of the things I always, I don't want to say get confused about or just wonder how we're going to solve it. But so oftentimes people talk about, the government being wasteful. I live in D.C. I have friends who work for the government. I'm not going to go into it, but the government is wasteful. And nobody has to, whatever. It just is, okay?
Yes,
it's not nearly as efficient as a corporation.
Sure.
But there is a value. Say there are things that the government does that corporations won't do. For example, I always use the example when we went to the moon. Like, that didn't have any, we didn't see an ROI, and we couldn't predict what the technological advances that would come from that, okay? Or the military, right? Like, we put so much money into the military, and then you have Republicans who are saying, like, we need to strengthen it, and how Obama is weakening us because he's taking money from it and he's pulling troops out and all this stuff. And I just wonder, like, how does your plan how does it relate to the issue of, a smaller government? But I just worry, because I think I'm for it. And look, I'm still forming my opinions, and nobody here really cares what my opinion is anyways. But it's like, we still need the government to fill the potholes on the road, get the schools in working condition, keep the country safe, explore new, so if we put too much money in the hands of people, and I'm not saying that's what you're advocating for, I'm just going to the extreme, and then they spend it on, I don't know, clothes or something, or, whatever, or they just hoard it. How does that work? Or did you address that at all?
Well, I think one of the important points I want to make about the government is that, everybody says we don't want government, but they all benefit from it. Whether you're collecting,
exactly,
whether you're getting Medicare, you're getting healthcare programs, whatever it is, they are benefiting. Whether the state government, local government, they're all benefiting from that. And the key here is that there is a role for government. That's for the first thing.
Yeah.
What we are saying is that government is collecting taxes, whether the IRS or the state government, they're collecting taxes. And if we can create incentives for the corporations, right? So that way they can share the growth of the company and the wealth of the company with their employees. And it's not something like, it depends. I don't think a lot of it is going to be in the form of, 401k plans. And there are restrictions in terms of at what age you can withdraw and how much you can withdraw. So it's not like, it's like a slush fund that people are handing out so that way they can go and shop at Macy's or other stores. Yeah. I think what we are saying that we have to educate the people also that what the rich people know that the poor people or middle class don't know.
Good. And go, Upendra, go.
That's very important. We have to provide that education and say, look, there is a way. This is a path for you to create the wealth. Mm-hmm. And of course, not if you are foolish and you want to throw it away. And I think most of the people are very smart. I mean, they're not going to throw it away. I think they're going to take this opportunity. People are looking for this type of opportunities to grow their wealth. And a lot of them they don't know where to look to. And they look to the unions, and unions have been struggling in terms of a lot of the challenges they face in terms of they're pushing for minimum wage increases and things like that. But I think we need to think about ownership. And that is what we are advocating for, and I think that is not going to. I think that is going to make more people millionaires.
Right. And Chris, you say you're on the fence. I'm going to convince you and your listeners right now. And the word is human nature, and we address this very powerfully in the book. Human nature. You must work, and this is what the founders understood. This is where checks and balances came from. If you work with human nature versus against it, you will always succeed. The reason we're in trouble now is because we are lost. We've forgotten the lessons of history. We've forgotten the wisdom of our founding fathers. When you work with human nature, and that's where ownership comes in, no one will ever take care of you and your wealth better than you will yourself. Let me give you an analogy. Chris, have you ever taken your rental car to a car wash? Of course not.
Right.
Of course not. When you stay in a hotel room, you treat it the same as you do your own house? I don't. I throw the towels on the floor, okay? I don't make my bed, just to give you an example. So and these are obviously that now, in the extreme example, look at communist China and Mao Zedong. We address this very, very powerfully in the book. People may have heard of what was called the Cultural Revolution. What was the quote-unquote, cultural revolution? Mao believed that he could literally reshape people's human nature and have them want to give of themselves to the state and not think of their own needs. Unfortunately, it was a catastrophic mistake. Literally millions of people died. Look at the old Soviet Union, where people, eventually what happens is if you're working really, really hard and I'm not, and we're getting the same wage, eventually you say, what am I knocking myself out for? I might as well be like the other person. And so eventually everyone just starts looking after themselves, taking care of themselves. And pretty soon you had situations where they weren't producing enough food. People were starving to death. So it doesn't work. This idea of this utopia, and let me tell you something. When anyone promises you some kind of utopia, run the other way. And we say this idea works. Nothing's 100%. But let me tell you, it is by far the best and greatest idea, the best evolution that man can come up with in terms of political and social evolution. And because you're working with human nature, not against it. It's what our founders knew. It's what Lincoln knew. It's what many of our greatest people in history knew. We need to rediscover that and bring common sense back and have common sense in public policy. That would change everything for the better and solve income inequality permanently.
I want to mention this. You said I'm on the fence. I'm actually not on the fence in this specific issue or in what you guys are saying. I again, I'm no scholar, economist, historian, so I go off of kind of what we've talked about, and I'm going to get emails from people that say, "Oh, you didn't ask him this," and that's just not what I'm here for. So I'm trying to do the best I can.
Listen, I understand. We like the challenge.
Yeah. So no,
I appreciate that.
I actually really like the idea. And personally, I worked for Prudential for 6 years, but one of the best companies I've ever worked for. They had an employee stock purchase plan that was incredible. The most money I've ever had was when I left there. And I had been investing in that for about 4 years. I had built up a good amount of money, which allowed me to take time off and build 2 businesses.
Yes.
I see this in action, and I don't think I understood it then. I was a finance major and said, this makes sense. I'm going to put as much as possible into it.
Sure.
What I was talking about is more really almost this frustration, right? Because let me make this point and let you guys explain, or, to tell me about it, what you think. So, I don't know of many people who would say we shouldn't cut out tax loopholes. I think it's one of those things that everybody agrees with. But in the same way, I recently heard the statistic that the vast majority of Americans support stricter gun laws. Now, they don't actually want to get rid of guns, but the vast majority of people say we need stricter gun laws. The reason it's not happening is because of lobbyists and the power and influence of the NRA and gun lobbyists, right? In the same way, I feel like that's what I struggle with here. Is like, I don't see many people saying this is a bad idea, or at least this is worse than what we currently have.
They don't even know if that's the problem. Not only did the elected officials, it's not on their radar screen. That's what we're doing this.
But think about the tax loopholes specifically. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, why hasn't that happened yet? And it has to be because of the power in the hands of the few and the rich. How do we change that? Because it's almost, I just sometimes feel like, and this is what the Occupy movement came from, like, there's nothing we can do. They have too much power.
Let me give you an example, Chris. If there are 2 lines, let's say they're equal length, and how do you make one line longer than the other line without using the eraser?
You make it thinner?
No, you make one of the lines, make it a little bit longer. So that what we are saying is that what we are saying is that you are will not be able to address this income inequality overnight. It's going to take some time, long time. And the billionaires and millionaires, they continue to exist. But what we are saying, advocating for, is that we need to create more millionaires and through employee ownership. And I think anyway, they got all these presidential candidates, they're advocating for tax cuts. And the Republicans go for tax cuts, and Democrats say, "Oh, we want to increase tax cuts should benefit the poor and the middle class." And so, what we are saying is that when you give the tax cuts, make sure that those tax cuts go to the employee ownership companies, so that way they use that tax cuts to directly pass it on to the employees.
Yes.
And that's what the message is. And there is going to be, it's not an easy thing to, there are going to be people, naysayers about this idea. They are going to say, well, this is a corporate tax giveaway. The corporations are going to give it to their top management.
Right, I thought that too.
Yeah,
but not if it's
handled
properly. Yeah,
it's handled properly.
Right.
I think IRS tax code is there. IRS is overseeing when they are deducting those getting the tax incentives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense too, because we have we do this stuff all the time with our tax code, right? I mean, there are a billion different things you can do, so it's essentially, let's trim it down and make this one of the main focuses with the corporate.
All the candidates are advocating for a simpler tax code.
Right.
I mean, that is that means you are going to be eliminating many of the loopholes. I think that is the key, eliminating the loopholes, but making sure whatever tax cuts you are giving are going to the right places. Right. They have to be earmarked for that particular purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yes, great point, Upendra. In other words, what we're saying, and it has been advocated by distinguished Professor Joseph Blasi on many of the media outlets and we agree with him, is yes, there are legitimate deductions and legitimate tax, benefit tax credits that can be given, but this is the most important one. As a matter of fact, we believe this should supersede all other deductions. In other words, if you don't have some form of shared capitalism and equity sharing, that should be the prerequisite for getting any other deductions.
Interesting.
Basically, Chris, in general, the idea in general, this is not a small idea. This is a very, very big idea, because we have to move to something like this because technologically is driving everything.
Right.
We currently have an 18th century economic model in a 21st century world. Mm-hmm. And if you go to our website, thethirdwaybook.com, you'll see in the research tab, there's also two tabs. One is an action step tab where people can literally take action. We've literally given them sample letters where they can write their elected representatives, how they can contact the media, exactly what to do. People can be an army of one. We've made it really easy for them. But we also show them the simple data and the charts. One of the charts, which I believe, and many have said, it was developed by Louis Kelso and his wife Patricia Kelso, which were the founders of the movement that today has nearly 15 million people, and just in the United States, across the world. There was a chart that I believe in the field of economics is as important and powerful as E equals MC squared was in the field of physics. It's that powerful. And it shows this at the dawn of our republics in 1776. Coincidentally, that also many believe was the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. 90% of productive power came from labor, 10% from capital. And there's almost a straight line graph. They've charted this out to now in the 21st century, in the year 2000 and beyond, 90% of productive power is coming from capital, 10% from labor. And that continues to accelerate. Today, Chris, there's more power in each person's cell phone than would put a man on the moon. Oh, yeah. And that's not going to stop.
Yeah, no, that doesn't, those statistics don't surprise me at all.
Yeah, so if you don't understand, if you don't understand what's driving this inequality, the millionaires and billionaires understand they have to own capital. Technologically driven, income-producing capital is where the future is. We have to the reason there's such unrest is we've literally decoupled labor from capital. Mm-hmm. It's like ripping a bed sheet apart. Mm-hmm. And we wrote It's on the cover of our book, and it took us a long time before we put the word revolution, reform or revolution. It's that serious. Mm-hmm. And to put that word on the book took a lot of thought, but it's that grave. If you don't do something very similar to what we're saying, which is broad-based property ownership, the two, labor and capital, if you don't relink them together with some intelligent public policy, you will literally rip society apart. We're already seeing it on the streets of our inner cities, and the middle class is really upset. They don't understand what's happening to them, but they are being massacred because of tectonic forces that are driving this.
Absolutely.
There was a statement by Treasury in U.S. Treasury in the year 2000 regarding the pension policies. They say that the aim of the national policy in this area should be to ensure equitable distribution of pension benefits. So all we are saying is that replace the words pension benefits to incentive-based pay.
Yeah.
And the statement would apply. I think that is what we are advocating in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Well, guys, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. This has been enlightening. I anticipate some emails and feedback, and I'll be sure to let you know. Again, the book is The Third Way. Is there anywhere else that you want to guide our listeners? I know we mentioned the website a few times. Anything else that you want to let them know?
No, I think the ESOP Association has a link. I think they should also visit the website of the ESOP Association, ESOP, and that's important. Also, we have a companion book, authored by Professor Joseph Blasi. It's called The Citizen Share.
Yes.
And I think that's also a good read, but it's more for academia. But I think the thoughts about what our founding fathers thought about ownership. And Veny, Musum, and myself, we wanted to bring it down to a common person, so that way, not everybody is economists. I think we wanted to put in the terms people can understand.
Yeah.
And the other day when I was on the radio, and then my wife's friend's mother listened to it, and so he makes sense. Maybe she was telling her daughter to go buy the book.
Yes, yeah.
I think that's what I mean. Pay attention to this issue. Do your own research. Come up with the questions, and Veny and I myself are open to any questions, and we can, through the website, you can send us some. You can communicate with us with the Third Way, with the number 3, the thirdwaybook.com, and you can send us some questions. And do you want to give an email address? Or
yeah, well, no, it's everything Upendra said is on the website. All of our partners are on there.
Sure.
We even have the consultants, the top consultants in the country, that if a business wanted to do that, they can literally show them how to do that. It's a win-win for the business. And the trade associations, the two, one in Washington and one out in California. If someone wants to know where to go to work for a company like this, you can contact them. Everything's on the website. We tried to make it as simple and user-friendly as possible. Literally, it's crashed 3 times. We've been inundated with people interested in this, and we literally just got started. This is literally going to, and I said, Chris, any media outlet that gets on this is, you want ratings? Believe me, people are desperate to hear this message.
We want Donald Trump to listen to this message also.
Yeah, well,
not always focus on this terrorism, but also talk about some economic issues that are affecting the middle class and the poor class.
Wow, yeah, man. We'll have to make we'll have to make Donald Trump another episode. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Thanks so much for your time.
Great questions. Really good.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Upendra and Veny. Remember their book, The Third Way, Economic Reform or Social Revolution, The Solution to Income Inequality, Building Inclusive Capitalism Through Employee Ownership, How Wealth is Created. Ooh boy, that was a doozy. Can be found on Amazon or at your local bookstore. And if you do decide to purchase it on Amazon, please do not forget to use the Smart People Podcast Amazon link located at smartpeoplepodcast.com/Amazon. If you're looking for other free, easy ways to support the show, please head over to iTunes or Stitcher and leave a rating and review over there. It truly does help out the show. Only takes a couple minutes to do so, and we are very, very appreciative for every single review we receive, so thank you. The holidays are quickly approaching, so I hope everybody gets an opportunity to spend some time with some friends, family, loved ones, whoever that may be, and you just get the opportunity to reflect on 2015 and start to look forward to 2016. Our best of 2015 episodes are coming up the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for those, and we will see you all after the new year. Thanks again to the online education gurus over at Creative Live for sponsoring today's episode. Creative Live offers great online classes that help people enhance or dig into new skills like photography, design, music production, and business savvy. You can watch classes in their massive online catalog. There's always something streaming for free. Go to creativelive.com/smartpeople for 20% off any of Creative Live's classes. That's creativelive.com/smartpeople. Join millions of students from around the world and make your living doing what you love.